I was first introduced to Kodiak Robotics, not at a conference or industry event or through the podcast series, but in fact, here in Dallas, Texas, on the roads, had the opportunity to see one of Kodiak Robotics' autonomous trucks in action. And so that was my introduction to the organization. And I quickly learned that Kodiak Robotics is a leader in autonomous trucking, and have been very excited for the opportunity to have a conversation to learn more about Kodiak and more about what's happening within autonomous trucking. And so very excited today to have the opportunity to do so, and here to share more about Kodiak Robotics and autonomous trucking and all of the exciting things that they're doing within the industry. Have the opportunity to speak with Daniel Goff, the head of external affairs for Kodiak Robotics. Daniel, hello, and welcome to Are We There Yet?
Hi, Grant. Thanks so much for having me on today.
You're very welcome. Well, I'm so excited to have a conversation. As I shared with you, I'm just a big fan of Kodiak Robotics. And so for someone like me that's all about transportation and mobility, to see a new vehicle, an autonomous vehicle on the road is pretty incredible. And so since then, I've really been excited to learn more about the organization. But for some of the audience members that maybe aren't so familiar with Kodiak Robotics, would you mind introducing us to the company?
Sure, more than happy to, and that's really great. I to hear that you've actually seen our trucks on the road and seen the technology in action a little bit. So Kodiak Robotics, as you said, is a developer of autonomous trucking technology. We turned 5 back in April of 2023. So the tech industry is kind of in dog years. So we're starting to be kind of a middle-aged company here. We were founded by a guy named Don Burnett, who was really one of the sort of leading founding figures in the autonomous vehicle industry. He was a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon right after the DARPA challenge that kind of kicked off a lot of development in AVs. And when Google kind of swept through the department and said, anyone who's interested in trying to build vehicles that drive themselves, come with us, he joined. So it was one of the first, say, 10 or 20 engineers on the Google self-driving car project. And then after a few years, started to think that, what they were building at Google was really cool, but was in some ways going down the wrong path. And there were 2 reasons for this. One technical and one commercial. The biggest challenge, at this point, there are dozens and dozens of companies around the world, and even sort of hobbyists who have built vehicles that under normal circumstances can kind of like stay in their lane, drive down the road, go in a straight line, and generally can not hit anything. The problem is that generally is not good enough in autonomous vehicles. And that the most dangerous situations are also the most unusual situations. And when you're driving a car around a city neighborhood, there is an almost infinite array of unusual situations that can happen. You've got, pedestrians and bikers and kids chasing balls into the middle of the street, and pets, and all sorts of crazy things happen. And on the highway, started to think on highways, you don't have some of those problems. You have higher speeds, and that's something you have to deal with. But computers are pretty good at speeds. But you can constrain this problem quite a bit. The other issue, but that he thought was that, the taxi business is a rough business. And, we've seen that obviously traditionally taxis are, and Uber and Lyft have sort of struggled to turn a profit over the last few years, despite being sort of these massive global companies. But, there is a tremendous need in the trucking space to fill trucks for drivers. There's a tremendous driver shortage, and there's a real business model around driving trucks. And he thought if you combine sort of this business need in trucking with the fact that sort of you can actually build a business around highway-only autonomy, he thought trucking is the way to go. So he left Google, was one of the co-founders of a company called Otto that was acquired by Uber. And then when Uber sort of de-emphasized trucks, he left and founded Kodiak 5 years ago. So as you said, we're based in Silicon Valley, but we have a fleet of about 30 trucks that's based in Dallas. So if you live in Dallas, if you drive around Dallas, you'll probably see one of our trucks driving on the road. I get text messages on a semi-regular basis from friends who say, "Oh my God, I saw one of your trucks," and I kind of follow it for a little bit, but it stuck to the speed limit, and it didn't do anything sort of unusual, and I got bored and drove around it. So, we deliver freight every day for a range of customers, and happy to talk about that. Companies like CR England, IKEA, Forward, which is a big expedited delivery company, Siva Logistics, Werner, and it's really some of the biggest names in trucking. We deliver about 50 loads a week with a safety driver behind the wheel. But this is a technology that's really out on the roads today and is already changing how transportation works and how trucking works.
Yeah, that's incredible. I speak with a lot of really exciting cutting edge organizations, and really fitting within the theme of the Are We There Yet series. It's always about kind of the new things that are happening in transportation and mobility, and I don't often have the opportunity to speak with the company within the series, and find a company that I'm really interested, that's doing some cutting edge things, that at the same time is out really demonstrating those technologies on the road, in the real world. So it is really incredible for me to see the trucks, to see the technologies in action. And those are some amazing organizations, leaders within trucking, as you shared, that you're working with already. Would be curious, with some of those clients that are working with you currently and have trucks, on the road today that are making delivery for these organizations. Is there something that's characteristic of these companies beyond just being leaders in trucking? Is there something that kind of characterizes them, as the organizations that they themselves are really leading the way in terms of integrating, these types of technologies within trucking?
That's a great question. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, that these are companies that are thinking about the future of transportation and how future transportation technologies can fit in with their operations. And, I think your audience probably knows this, a little bit with some familiarity with the trucking industry and with transportation, but trucking faces really significant challenges as an industry. And the biggest challenge is that it is harder and harder to find people who want to drive long haul trucks. Local delivery is a bit of a different question, but people fundamentally want to be home with their families every night. And trucking jobs, long haul trucking jobs, involve people living out of the back of a truck for, days, weeks, sometimes even months at a time. And there are people who love doing that job, but there are fewer and fewer of them, and they're harder and harder to find. And a lot of them are retiring. And, a generation or so ago, it used to be okay for dad, and it was almost always dad, to do that, to be out for weeks or months at a time on the road and as send a paycheck home every 2 weeks. And that was kind of his role. But that's not how we live anymore, for better and for worse. And I think mostly for better. And so, filling these jobs is really hard. So I think one thing that, I've been with Kodiak for almost 4 years at this point. And when I first started working for the company, and you talk to people in the trucking industry and say, I'm working for this company and we're trying to build trucks that drive themselves, people would look at you like you were absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And perhaps not for no reason. But over the last few years, the industry has both grown to be much more comfortable with the technology, and that I think is something we've also kind of borne out internally in the industry, is just how safe this technology is, how sort of routine and uncontroversial delivering freight with this technology is. And I think also trucking industry has started to realize there's really nothing else coming to save them. The reality is that this technology can help to play a role in helping to keep our supply chains moving, when which is harder and harder to do given the challenges around finding drivers and people willing to drive long haul. So I think there's a lot of excitement in the industry. There are not a ton of large trucking companies that are not looking at autonomy one way or another, particularly in sort of the segment of the trucking industry that does have real long haul operations. And I think there's a lot of interest from, our customers are generally companies on the leading edge of that, willing to try out new things and sort of start to identify what what the future holds.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that, and it's good to learn a little bit more about kind of what characterizes some of these companies, and just as you shared, what a need there is, especially within trucking for these technologies. I imagine that there is good reason that these organizations, these leaders within trucking, have chosen to work with Kodiak Robotics versus others in the space. There certainly are many other organizations that are working to do the same thing within an industry, and these leaders have selected Kodiak Robotics as their partner within autonomous trucking. And I can imagine that has some to do certainly with just the innovative technology and the products that you offer, and the ease of kind of moving towards implementing autonomous trucking within their operations. Would you mind speaking to some of the advantages that Kodiak offers versus the competition?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I would both technical and kind of from a partnership perspective, and how we view our commercial partnerships, that I think I don't want to speak for our customers, but I think is what attracted them to Kodiak. So on the technical side, I think we've really built our system, which we call the Kodiak driver, to be very sort of designed for deployment. And I think we've spent a lot of time listening to our customers and listening to people in the trucking industry to understand what their real pain points are and what their concerns about this technology are, and address those concerns head on. So I think kind of the clearest example of this is really around how we've designed our hardware. So in the autonomous trucking industry, with almost every company that's in our space, we're working with traditional, we buy trucks off the line and we upfit them, as it's called in the industry, and add the hardware we need to them so that the truck can drive itself. And, trucking is an industry where every second counts. And there's an expression in the trucking industry: if the wheels ain't turning, you ain't earning. If the truck's not driving, you've got an expensive asset, piece of equipment that's sitting there not earning any money. Yeah. And so, we realized pretty early on the importance of building a system that's really easy to maintain and simple to maintain, even for people who do not have a lot of expertise or any expertise in building and maintaining autonomous systems. And so the sort of the core of this approach is what we call our sensor pods, which is we took all of the sensors that the vehicle needs to drive, the cameras, the radar, the LiDAR, and integrated them into two basically mirror enclosures. So we replace the stock side view mirrors on the trucks, and we add our sensors to a custom mirror enclosure that we've built. And this sensor pod is essentially plug and play. It's 3 cables, 6 bolts, and we can actually send a YouTube video. So if something goes wrong with a sensor going down the road, we can actually send a YouTube link to a technician and have a technician swap out one of those sensor pods and ship it back to us for repairs. And it takes about 10, 15 minutes, even if you've never seen one of these things before. So it's a really simple approach. It's about the same amount of time as it takes to change a tire. It's probably a little bit less complicated technically than changing a tire. So it's really simple. It's something that anybody can do. And, it's when you're planning on operating trucks across, hundreds or thousands of miles, you can't count on there being an autonomous engineer and, who understands how to maintain these systems, within 5 miles of all of that 1,000-mile stretch. So I think our customers are really impressed by this approach, and they understand when they see the sensor pod how they can actually fit this technology into their operations. They look at this and say, I think this is something our teams can learn to handle. And I think that's really important and powerful for them. We're not asking them to kind of like learn a lot of brand new things. I think that another example of that is the way we approach mapping. I think that sort of the traditional for a technology that's at most sort of 15 years old is kind of a weird term to use, but it's the one, that comes to mind. The way a lot of autonomous vehicles work is basically you build a very, very detailed map of everything happening in a neighborhood. So every curb, every mailbox, every street sign, every house. And the system has this really, really giant detailed map that gets down to, inches or smaller, centimeter level sort of precision. And if the map looks different from the real information that's coming in from the vehicle's sensors, the vehicle says, huh, I would expect there to be a mailbox, 30 feet to the right, but I'm getting a different object 10 feet to the right. Maybe that's a kid crossing the street, and it's sort of kid shaped. And that's kind of one of the ways that autonomous vehicles navigate the world. And we realized this approach very early on. This approach works really, really well for city driving, but on highways, it isn't an ideal approach, because fundamentally highways don't have a lot of useful information. There are no mailboxes. Every inch of highway kind of looks like the next inch. And you got some trees off to the side, but like, trees grow and they lose their leaves and they grow their leaves and they change, and they sway in the wind. So that's not super helpful. So we built a different system that we call lightweight maps that has much less of that information. That's really key to highways. Basically, it's just kind of the lane markings, the where the highway is, the connectivity, so entrances and exits and things like that. And we think this is a much better and safer approach for highway driving. It also has the advantage of being much easier to build and maintain these maps. And with when you've got a lot of details in a map, when something if a little thing changes, the map is no good. But when you've got fewer details, there's much less that can kind of go stale. And so it makes it much easier for us to maintain these maps over the course of hundreds or thousands of miles of deployment lanes. I think that really resonates with our customers as well, because they understand that again, this is sort of a game of trucking is a game of inches. And having sort of simpler maps that are easy to maintain is really, really critical to long-term operations. Now, this is a long answer to a very simple question, but I also think, embedded in all of this is, I think we're really focused as a company on doing what we do and not doing what we don't do. And so we've worked very carefully through our partner deployment program, which is kind of our partnership program, to work closely with our customers, to understand their needs, and to really partner and help us work together to figure out how we're going to integrate our technology into their fleets. And I think they appreciate that partnership. And we've just learned a ton that, we're a tech company, we're not a trucking company. And I think we're pretty humble about the parts of this that we don't know. And I think they appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Perfect answer, and can really understand why those companies have selected Kodiak as their partner. So makes a lot of sense. You've developed, as you shared, an incredible mapping technology that's more appropriate for this application. You've made it really easy for the operators to use the technology, integrate the technology, troubleshoot, and so that all makes a lot of sense. Is it safe to say, fitting within the Are We There Yet series, you shared some clients that are already, seeing the value in integrating these technologies within their fleets? Is it safe to say that, really realizing the benefits of autonomous technologies within trucking that were there? Would be curious about your take on that. I know it's always an ever improving process, and there's a lot more to come from the industry and from Kodiak. I know over the next few years, but are we there yet today?
I think we are there yet. I mean, I think one of the things, look, we are still operating with a safety driver behind the wheel, and we will do that until we can demonstrate conclusively that without a safety driver, we're as safe as we are with a safety driver.
Yeah.
And there's still some work to do there. But I think from an operational perspective, we are running a 24/7 shop today, and we are delivering freight for our customers. And again, I think maybe one more thing our customers like about us is we provide an excellent quality of service. And I think that's important, that, the biggest transition for a new technology is kind of from gee whiz to routine and to excellence. And I think we've made that transition. And our customers like working with us. We deliver on time. We provide good service. And they see how this is going to make their lives easier and better. And, and there's that the transition to driverless is going to be very smooth and very simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you started too with safety, and that really being kind of a driving force and very much a priority, for Kodiak is just, perfecting the technology, ensuring that safety, having the safety, operator there until which point that no longer have to be. So I love that you kind of started with that. I think that certainly says a lot, about the organization. In addition to all of the incredible work that Kodiak is doing in terms of really refining the technology, and we're seeing that as with some of the incredible partners that you're working with, that they're adopting this technology within trucking. So in addition to that kind of adoption and technology development and ensuring, of course, that everything is very safe, there's also a lot on the policy side of things that affect kind of the commercialization and the development of this. So I'd love to get your take on some of the policy issues that are affecting the autonomous trucking industry, and what do we really need to do to kind of get clear and move into kind of full deployment, full potential of the technology.
Yeah, this is a question near and dear to my heart. I work on public policy is kind of my day job when I'm not recording podcasts.
Yeah,
I would say for autonomous trucks, there kind of are two buckets worth of policy issues that we think about. The first is kind of what I would call the big picture issues. I mean, there's I love what we're doing. You love what we're doing. There are definitely a lot of people who say, I cannot believe there are people who would allow 80,000-pound vehicles on the roads without drivers. Like, we understand that the public remains skeptical about this. And I think there's still some work to kind of create high-level safety regulations and kind of continue to gain the public trust around these issues. I think we've made some progress over the last few years. And I think that, the reality is that the safety record of this industry is very strong. To the extent that people, if there were any safety incidents involving this industry, people would be aware. But there really haven't been, which I think really speaks to the strength of what we're doing and the strength of our safety programs. I would say, the secondary, I would say, is kind of the small scale issues. The trucking industry is a highly regulated industry. There are regulations regarding how vehicles must be maintained, how drivers must behave on the road, and all sorts of, rules and regulations sort of promulgated by the U.S. Department of Transportation, but really regulated by state law enforcement that are sort of critical to the trucking industry. So state highway patrols generally have commercial vehicle enforcement divisions that are responsible for enforcing regulations around trucking. And so we've been working over the last 4 or 5 years with the federal government, through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is the federal trucking regulator, and with state and local officials and commercial vehicle officers, most importantly through the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, which is kind of the National Association of Commercial Vehicle Officers, to adapt these regulations that currently exist to trucking. Now, most of these regulations actually fit autonomous trucking. Most of these regulations fit autonomous trucking just fine. There are a handful of issues that sort of needed to be modified or addressed, and we really solved the bulk of those issues. The most important being how to handle waste stations, how to handle the commercial vehicle enforcement and inspections that occur at a waste station. When you drive down the road and you see a sign for a waste station, trucks are supposed to pull in there, get weighed, and get inspected. And so very, very excited. Last fall, I've been working and kind of leading for the industry on this. And last fall, that we announced with the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance sort of an initial framework for how autonomous vehicles are going to interact with waste stations and interact with commercial vehicle enforcement. And, obviously we're still in the early days, but we think this is a workable solution. And I think it really goes to show that the people who understand highway safety the best really see the potential of this technology. So we're really excited. Regulators, I think, have been really forward-leaning and trying to think through how to actually get this technology out on the road, because they understand the potential to make the road safer through automating driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Very hard to predict. I can imagine. But when do you see all of this coming together? So you've checked the box in terms of safety. You no longer have the need for a safety operator. Policy is in place now and supportive of integrating autonomous trucking at scale, within the entire industry. And you've refined your technology and solutions to the point you're very much ready to kind of adopt within the entire industry. When do you see all of these things happening? And I know at the same time you need everyone to be on board, in terms of understanding that this is a safer solution than drivers operating vehicles. So you've got to have all that support. So from kind of a technology, policy, safety, national, state level in enforcement, when do you see all of that coming together to where we're at a point now to where, we see these at scale, there's no longer a safety operator, and we're kind of seeing this all happening nationwide. When does that all come together from your perspective?
I mean, there's kind of a truism in the autonomous vehicle industry that it's not a question of when, it's a question of where. I think we expect to have built our safety case, our sort of proof that the system is safer than a human over the next 18 or so months, and hope to have our first driverless runs and driverless trucks on the road by the end of 2024. That will not be at scale. That will be the first, and it will scale from there. And it's that will probably be in Texas, but I think that over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we will see those operations grow. We will grow from a handful of trucks to dozens of trucks to hundreds of trucks, and certainly by 2028, this will be a fairly routine. Autonomous trucks will be a fairly routine sight on American roads. And I think they will be, largely uncontroversial and largely transparent. People are not going to notice that these, if anything, since these trucks can run 24/7 and don't really care if it's 4 a.m. or 4 p.m, you'll probably see fewer trucks on the road in general as a result of autonomy, and that'll help improve traffic. And let's be honest, nobody loves driving next to a semi truck. Like they're big and a little scary, and if we can move some of them to be on the road in big cities at 3 a.m, I think people will appreciate that. So It's going to take time to scale. Any sort of transformative new technology does. It's not going to be an explosion, but I think that over the course of the next few years, this will start to scale out, and we'll start to really hopefully start making a dent in the driver shortage and helping to shore up our supply chains.
Yeah. You're very much, and especially within your work and focus at Kodiak Robotics, I mean, I think you have a pulse on what's happening within autonomous trucking as much as anyone, in the world today within the industry. And so I think you have a real grasp of how that's moving. And as you just shared with us, I think have a pretty good idea of when, all of this is kind of coming together. Different industry, but I'm just curious because I'm interested in all things kind of transportation mobility. But do you see autonomous trucking happening at scale sooner than we'll see it within our personal vehicles?
That's kind of again, I think it kind of goes to the question of where, not when.
Yeah.
I think the day where individuals own vehicles that are kind of eyes off the road, hands off the steering wheel, is still a ways out.
Yeah.
But as you know, there are robo-taxis on the road today in Phoenix, in San Francisco. They're testing in Austin and Dallas, and I believe Houston as well. Los Angeles is on the radar for this year. These are still, again, early days. I don't know how many people are actually kind of commuting to work in a robo-taxi. Probably not a ton, but this is a technology that exists, and it's kind of a weird quirk that, like, I think that we're kind of at the bottom of a hype cycle around autonomous vehicles at the time that this is actually working and actually happening, And I think that's kind of I can't quite explain that conundrum, but I think, I think most people's interaction with an autonomous vehicle sort of next to them on the road will maybe a truck more likely than a car, but certainly in certain communities that these are starting to be fairly widespread. And I find it strange also people don't necessarily know that. Maybe in those communities they're vaguely aware, but I don't think the average American realizes that you can hail a driverless taxi, from the Phoenix airport to your hotel in downtown Phoenix.
Yeah.
That is a tremendous, incredibly exciting technical achievement.
Yeah.
And I think it's largely happening sort of behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, and it very much speaks to your kind of where, not when, answer. You could ask when about it, but certainly in personal vehicles, it's happening today, in certain markets, and certainly the same is true within autonomous technology within trucking. There's major metropolitan areas that aren't really seeing autonomous trucks on the road today, but here in Dallas, they're everywhere. It's incredible the presence that you have in Dallas, and since seeing that first one, have had the opportunity to see a few on the road. And so I think that, when, not exactly where, makes a lot of sense. So appreciate you sharing that. I know that with the audience within the Are We There Yet video podcast series, there's a lot of organizations, some of which are working with you already, many that aren't. There's going to be a lot of individuals, a lot of companies out there that are going to be excited to learn more about the organization and explore partnerships and opportunities to work together. Would you mind maybe just directing the audience to the website
Sure.
where they can learn more about the company?
Our website is Kodiak.ai, and you can always email us at contact@Kodiak.ai. And I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is Dan@Kodiak.ai. So always happy to talk, and I am always happy to tell people more about what's happening with Kodiak and what's happening in this exciting industry.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you taking the time today, Daniel, to share more about Kodiak Robotics. And this, for me, has been an especially fun and educational conversation to go from first just seeing a Kodiak autonomous truck passing by here in the Dallas, Texas area, and having the opportunity to speak with you today to learn more about it has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk. This has been great.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.